part of your community, you are part of mine. I live here in Austin too. So I just want to like look at you and see you as a human, and hopefully you guys can do the same to me. Okay, I used abortion care here in Texas in 2017 for medical reasons. My partner and I, he's over at the table over there, we decided that we were gonna move to Austin and start a family. We were really excited. We got pregnant on the first try. We were like, woo, this is working out. And at week 13, I ended up bleeding. And I go to the hospital here in South Austin, and they tell me the reason why I'm bleeding is because I was walking too much the night before, which I was too naive to know better, but that's a lie, y'all. You shouldn't, walking should not make a pregnant person start bleeding. That's a lie. And what I had found out later on, during this time in 2017, Texas was trying to pass a law called HB 25, which would legally allow doctors to lie about fetal abnormalities to patients if they feared that their patient would use abortion care. And so even though it only passed the House and it did not become law, I have met other mothers who have been in the same situation as me, and luckily they weren't as far as I was, but doctors are lying to their patients about unhealthy pregnancies. That is happening here in Texas. So my doctor lied when I was at week 13. I go to my OBGYN and she confirms it was walking. And we continue the pregnancy. A few weeks later, we go in for what we think is a gender reveal, and we see that our daughter's legs are turned in. They look a little wonky. And we're like, what's going on? And our doctor said, oh, don't worry about it. It's nothing. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And they told me I did not need an amniocentesis, which determines if you're having a healthy pregnancy or not. So on the chart, it says that I declined the test. So learn from my mistake. If you're thinking that you need a test and your doctor says, oh, you don't need it, tell them, be like, okay, you write it on the chart, you write it on my chart that you said I didn't need to, and that's the reason why I declined. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, especially here. Unfortunately, it is what it is, and we have to be our own advocates. Anyway, fast forward with the feet. So I reach out to my mom, and we're trying to speculate what's going on, and she's like, well, my brother, your uncle, was born with club feet. Maybe that's what it is. So the next 2 weeks I come in, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's club feet, and I ask my doctor, and she's like, she doesn't answer me. She's really, avoiding the question and avoiding the topic. So we go another few weeks, and it wasn't until I had to go to another doctor for a more detailed sonogram when I found out the truth. And he said, do you see your daughter's feet, her legs? And I was like, yes. And he was like, your doctor didn't explain anything? No. So we do some testing, and he comes back and he's like, okay, your daughter has spina bifida. You can detect that at week 12. They should have been able to detect that. My daughter had health issues or heart issues. The blood was not circulating correctly. She had hydrocephalus, which means there was water in the brain, so she would need a few more surgeries for a brain stunt. There was all sorts of other issues, and then we found out that possibly there is a a surgery that we could do where I could go to Houston. There's only 3 hospitals in the country that do this sort of test, where they go in and they go into the where the open wound is for spina bifida. I don't know if y'all know this, but you basically have an open wound on your back, and the spinal nerves are exposed, and it's very painful. But was disqualified for this surgery because we found out that she also had Turner syndrome, so it disqualified for the surgery because they were like, well, we've only done this 4 times, and we've only had a success rate of 50%. So that means 2 of the fetuses did not survive, and 2 did. So I already had like a very low chance of, qualifying, and then I was disqualified, and we found out that I was still bleeding internally, and my life was starting to become at risk. And that's when my partner and I decided, okay, this isn't really a choice. We have to use abortion care, unfortunately. And that's when we came into all of the laws here in Texas, where even though it was for a medical reason, I was not allowed to use my health insurance. Even though my partner was in the military at that time, we had like some of the best insurance in the country, but we weren't allowed to use it. So when I scheduled my abortion, they told me, because of the laws, you were supposed to be here today on Monday for the week-long session. So you have to wait another week, which now would have been the very last week before the 22-week ban. This was before SB8, obviously. And they were like, and you have to pay as soon as you make the appointment. And I said, okay, well, how much is it? They said, well, because you're waiting another week, it's $700 more. So now it's $2,700. My partner and I think I was making like $300 every 2 weeks. So yeah, we could not afford that. I had to ask for family help, and luckily they were able to help us out. But we were forced to travel to San Antonio. The clinic was really creepy looking. It looked like an office building. I was like, I was supposed to have like major surgery here, and it looks like this is where you go for like IT work. It was so weird. But while I was in there, my partner was not allowed to be with me through the whole week-long process. So every day that I had to be there all by myself. And when it came time for the surgery, I actually was in labor for 5 hours, all by myself, surrounded by all these young women and girls, separated by a curtain. But all I had for support was my phone to text my partner and let him know that I could feel our daughter moving from the side of me to, down here. And we got pregnant on purpose. This is our baby. Like, even when she was just a clump of cells, I was like, it's my baby. So this is like a very unreal life experience. And while I was in surgery, my partner didn't know anything. I didn't say, hey, I'm about to go. I just had to go. The clinic closed. So everybody who was in the waiting room was kicked out of the clinic. And my partner is texting me, calling me. He's like, okay, I don't know why she's not answering. So he calls the clinic and he's like, I just want to check on the status of my partner. And they're like, we cannot confirm nor deny that she's even here. So it was just a really traumatic experience. We had no idea what was going on. It was craziness. And then as soon as I came to it, because I had to be put under anesthesia, as soon as I came out, they were basically like, all right, thanks, bye. Here's the door, leave. Which, I don't blame them because, the laws are against you, and I guess, shit happens. Sorry, language. And I try not to, have hate for the providers, because thank God I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. But I definitely had some trauma because of the way that their hands were tied. They couldn't correctly take care of us. I think that's it. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Kristen, thank you for telling that story. I think it's really important for people to understand what, because these anti-abortion forces sort of, prey on what people don't know about late-term abortions, right? And they try to, shame the women and shame the people who need abortions at that time, but most of those are for health reasons and because the pregnancies are not viable. So thank you for telling your story. I think it's really important. I was going to give a little background on Kristen, and we're going to do a little Q&A back and forth, and then maybe some questions from the audience. So Kristen is a queer, disabled, white, and Indigenous woman who grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago before moving to Austin 6 years ago, so you're still a newcomer here. They are reconnecting Native from the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina and hopes to shed light on our right to bodily autonomy by sharing her abortion care story in virtual reality. So thank you. I wanted to ask you, so how do you think your identity as an Indigenous woman affected your medical experience?
Okay, let's talk about racism. Okay, it affects me, it's been affecting me since childhood. So I'm disabled. I also have a chronic illness. I have celiac disease. It took me over 5 years just to get diagnosed, and I fully believe it's because I had a brown mother taking me to these appointments, and I constantly was gaslit by my doctors being like, oh, you're chewing bubblegum too much, or you're drinking too much soda. And I'm like, oh no, it's actually a disease where I can die. No big deal. Could have been bubblegum though, right? But yeah, no, just I've experienced a lot of, I guess, okay, because I am white, it's more like discrimination rather than racism, right? The difference, you see that? So, I don't know. It's like I see the intersectionality because I've experienced it. That's my life experience. So when this happened, I wasn't entirely sure. I was like, I don't know. And my doctor knew that I was lumpy. She's from North Carolina. And I was like, people don't really like us. Like if you're from my state, a lot of people don't like white people. So I definitely experienced kind of like discrimination within the medical community and the healthcare practices.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the history of Indigenous women and reproductive care? And did you find your experiences were aligning with that history?
Yes. So being lied to by my doctor made me have a direct remembrance to how in the 60s and 70s here in America, 25 to 50% of Native American women were forcibly sterilized. The reason why we even have birth control was because it was tested on Puerto Rican women, and we only know from these awful healthcare practices that were exploited, that exploited Native women. And being part of that, I remember all of the atrocities that happened to my people and my community. Even African American women in North Carolina, I think 50% in the 60s and 70s as well, African American women were also forcibly sterilized. I really think of that. Sorry, I'm a little distracted here singing now, but.
And these abortion bans, they affect reproductive health in general, but the people who are disproportionately affected are women of color and poor women and women who don't have the privilege of being able to pick up and leave their jobs with their families to go get an abortion. How has your experience with desired pregnancy and nannying shaped your experience and your perspectives and feelings towards reproductive rights advocacy?
Okay, so I'm a nanny, and majority of the spaces that I'm in are with other mothers, and knowing what I know now, that 62% of people who use abortion care are already mothers. I've come into contact with other mothers here in Austin who have also been lied to by their doctors. Not as far as I have, but they've been in the same situation that I'm in. So this is definitely happening a lot. I forgot the question. I'm sorry. I'm also ADHD, y'all. Sorry.
Just how that experience of being a nanny and having your experience with desired pregnancy affected your perspective towards breast cancer.
It's also, okay, thank you. It's also made me realize just how our voices, those in these spaces that are mothers or like caretakers or get pregnant because they want to, right? And then have to use abortion care. Our voices and stories aren't really shared in the women's movement and the reproductive justice movement. It's mostly, we hear the abortion is healthcare phrase, right? But seldom do we hear that people actually die if they don't use treatment. So it's given me more space in communities that don't normally have their voices shared. And it's only made me realize like how much more important it is for me to share. Because honestly, can I just be honest with y'all? Yes. I don't really want to be an activist. Like, right? I just want to live. Like, god damn. But like, you know, people in my position are dying, and it is, I feel a responsibility to share our stories, because oftentimes, you know, we're not in positions where we have the ability to be an activist. We got kids to take care of, we got mouths to feed, you know, brains to develop. Most parents don't have time to like be here and like be an activist and share their stories. So, you know, it lights a fire within me. Thank you.
I mean, I really appreciate that. And to me, it's a signal of how important it is that everybody get into this fight. Because if you're standing on the sidelines, you're actually allowing these things to continue. So we're coming to our last question. How have your support systems, particularly those with men, shaped your experiences, and what would you suggest to men or others on how to support those facing an unsafe or unwanted pregnancy?
Thank you. That's a really important question. So I filmed my abortion care story in virtual reality with a team of filmmakers from Canada, and they filmed a few other stories here in Austin. And what they've noticed, that every couple that shared their story, that it wasn't, even though yes it's like a women's issue, right, that all of us had something important to say about our partners, which all of our partners just so happen to be men. And it's important that men are part of this conversation, because y'all are the ones who are making us have babies. Y'all are part of this too. You know, with my experience, with my partner not being able to support me in the way that I needed, that, like, having other men hear that story, it bothers them. And hearing how they're so bothered by it gives me hope, because it's like, oh, y'all care, thank you. Like, y'all understand that you are part of this. Like, it's not, well, first off, not only women get pregnant, right? But men are just as much part of this. Like, obviously we should be the ones speaking, but y'all should be our cheerleaders, you know? You're just as much part of this as I am. If my partner had not supported me, like, I don't even know if I would be here right now speaking to y'all. Like, having an emotional response system, like, you need that. And especially with wanting to make a baby on purpose. I mean, we still have we still have like baby clothes, we still have a potty, a little Elmo potty, we still have all our stuff. And I don't think I would be able to look at that if I didn't have him and his support. And I think it's important to note that because, especially in our movement within reproductive justice, seldom do you hear how important it is to have our partners and our male partners to support us. So all the men here, thank you for being here. You can support us more by just being at more of these spaces. You know, calling out your boys whenever your dude friend says something. Be like, ah, come on, man. Like, you know, you don't have to be, you don't have to be like, hey, don't do that. That's not feminist. Like, you don't have to be so aggressive about it, but just be like, come on, bro. Like, come on. Don't do that. Don't say that. Like, that's all we need. Like, and more. But like, that's the baseline. Start small. But like, just be in our spaces and tell us that you care about us. That's really the emotional support. Really means a lot.
Kristen, thank you so much for sharing your story and being in conversation with me. And yeah, everybody should speak up and join in this struggle.